Akira, known as the odd species, joined the first day's championship battle with Kamari, the groper. Kuroda was distracted by Akira, not noticing Kamari silently sneaking up behind him, reaching out to grope him. Kuroda's timely intervention prevented a more inappropriate touch. While everyone was disgusted by Kamari's actions, Akira swiftly took the lead. The duo's teamwork was impressive. As Shunsuke prepared to pursue, he realized Naruko was missing. By then, Akira was far ahead, with Naruko unexpectedly close behind. Unaffected by the distraction, Naruko had been planning to reclaim his title as sprinter by defeating Akira, seizing a golden opportunity. Akira accepted Naruko's challenge, starting an intense shake sprint, his tongue out in his strongest form. Surprisingly, Naruko, previously weak at climbing, kept pace with him uphill. Akira proposed a partnership, offering to let Naruko win if he led to the finish. Naruko, being pragmatic, declined. As verbal tactics failed, Akira shifted gears, hinting at a hidden strategy. Meanwhile, two trailing Hakone cyclists suggested a team effort to Shunsuke to catch up with Naruko and Akira. After some thought, Shunsuke agreed, forming a trio. Kuroda prepared to unleash his hidden strength, which involved reopening a facial scar to boost his adrenaline, revealing his masochistic side. Kuroda and Takuto, sharing a passive synergy skill, glowed blue, pushing each other's limits. Kuroda signaled it was Shunsuke's turn to lead, alternating to maintain top speed while Takuto conserved energy. Akira widened the gap with Naruko, leaving Shunsuke's group further behind. As Akira seemed poised to win, Naruko caught up again. Naruko had been conserving energy for a final sprint, his specialty as a former sprinter. Unbeknownst to him, Akira had also unleashed his secret weapon, unlocking his legs' full potential. The bound muscles were released. Both competitors gave their all just before the finish line. Meanwhile, Sadatomi and several freshmen arrived at the finish line, ready to witness their senior's victorious moment. However, Koga called to inform them that he might not make it in time. He entrusted them with the task of cheering for the seniors. Sadatomi panicked, claiming he couldn't do it, which was baffling. How hard can it be to simply shout encouragement? An audience member was more nervous than the competitors themselves, which was hard to understand. Meanwhile, Tadakura was driving furiously and managed to bring Yusuke and Shingo to the finish line of the first day ahead of time. The seniors had also come to watch the race. By then, Naruko and Akira had entered the final straight, neither yielding as they began to bump against each other's bikes. When only 900 meters were left, Akira pulled ahead by a body length. Naruko, not to be outdone, activated his turbo boost to overtake again. Both were riding high-powered diesel bikes, engaging in a fierce chase. At this time, Kuroda and his two companions had just entered the straightaway. Kuroda realized they were 350 meters behind Akira and the front runners, making it nearly impossible to overtake in the remaining 1,000 meters. Takuto then decided to step up. Although his task was to compete for the championship, given the current situation, catching up with the two ahead was doubtful. Now was not the time to conserve energy. Hakone Academy had nothing left to lose. His mind began to play symphonic music, a sign he was giving his all. He lifted off the saddle and started his signature metronome rocking of the bike. With Kuroda and Takuto alternating in the lead, the trio quickly closed in on the front, but only 500 meters remained to the finish. However, most of the situation was within Akira's calculations, except for Naruko, who had exceeded his expectations. The two continued their bumping battle. Akira acknowledged Naruko's strength and even started making unexpected compliments, suggesting how great it would be if Naruko joined Kyoto Fushimi High School and how they could become good friends. However, Naruko saw through this odd talk, realizing Akira was just trying to ease his own nerves to seize an opportunity to overtake. Despite all the talking, they had only moved forward 100 meters. In fact, both were like the Flash, running so fast that time seemed to stop, allowing them time to chat. Akira declared it was time to use his ultimate move, though it was unclear which of his many ultimate moves it actually was. Kuroda couldn't bear it anymore. He turned on the switch again and blood gushed out. "Your wound healed pretty fast," he noted. "It has already scabbed over." As he looked back, he saw people catching up. Akira was not panicking at all. Instead, he started wildly swinging his large tongue. His target was the series of bends before the finish line. Behind him, Locust wings slowly emerged. Akira was not just the attack titan, he had also participated in the Martian alien program with locust genes implanted in his body. No wonder he resembled an alien. However, Naruko was different from before. He used his true, strongest killer tactic, recalling his previous loss to Akira. He staked his manhood on this race, vowing not to be a man if he lost. Driven by his care for his brother, Naruko still led after 2 bends. Only 150 meters of straight sprint remained. Yes, you heard right. After all this talk, there were still 150 meters left. Meanwhile, Kuroda, in his pursuit of those ahead, took the bends with his shoulder against the guardrail. He was literally bleeding profusely. In his masochistic ecstasy, he covered the bends with blood and lightning, reducing the gap to 2 seconds. Coming out of the bends, Kuroda pushed Takuto forward with all his might and then crashed, effectively dying on the spot. Is there a chance today is just the first day? You've killed yourself. What about the next 2 days? Are you really not pranking your teammates? Now Takuto was another contender for the championship. The 3 were neck and neck, each showing their skills. Akira kept sticking out his tongue. Naruko used his memory tactic, remembering the bitterness of dismantling the carbon wheel set. Takuto inherited Kuroda's will. All 3 shouted their lungs out. Don't you need to breathe while cycling? I can't believe it. Over a mere 500 meters, they rode a whole 20-minute episode. I could crawl faster than you guys on the ground. In the end, Takuto, with his height advantage, pushed his bike past the finish line first. Hakone Academy won the first day. Naruko and Akira tied for second. Then came the award ceremony. Akira, not winning first, had a mental breakdown and asked a teammate to receive the award on his behalf. Hakone Academy claimed a complete victory on the first day, taking all the sprint and mountain prizes. Sohoku finished second in everything. Suddenly, Issa fell ill. He criticized the seniors for being heartless, not feeling sad about taking second place. Why create such a stupid character to contrast with the seniors? Shunsuke grabbed his hair and started teaching him a lesson. He told Issa that Naruko lost because of his height disadvantage, a factor he couldn't change no matter how hard he tried. Naruko had to hide and cry alone. In the locker room, Tashima was also in bad shape from overexertion. Moving slightly made him ache. However, he was very grateful to Sakamichi for helping him reach the finish line. Not just Tashima had problems. Issa also collapsed suddenly, his body having been sustained by adrenaline until then. Tashima asked Sakamichi to find Naruko because he had something to say to everyone. Unexpectedly, Sakamichi didn't find Naruko, but instead found the senior trio. Now is not the time for reminiscing. Sakamichi said the team needed encouragement from senior Shingo. He grabbed Shingo and tried to run to the tent. However, Shingo said this was their race, and they should support each other. As graduates, seniors should not interfere. Disappointed, Sakamichi returned to the resting area. By then, Naruko had already come back on his own. The strategy meeting officially started. Tashima felt everyone should still maintain the right attitude. They were still challengers. Sakamichi shared his encounter with the seniors and relayed Shingo's words. Shingo's reason for not coming to comfort everyone was strange. He thought his presence would relieve their tension. It was better to let them struggle in their discomfort. I strongly suspect the author has masochistic tendencies. His logic always seems to start from a masochistic point of view. Everyone was inspired and regained their spirits. Back at the hotel, Sohoku faced no major issues. However, Akira started acting up again. Like last year, he disappeared after losing the race. Kamari also went missing. But this time, Akira didn't run home. Instead, he was riding his bike alone, sucking on his arm. It looks like he's evolving into a mosquito. Soon after, Akira returned on his own, relieving his teammates. At Hakone Academy's side, despite being battered, Kuroda still decided to participate. The first day's battle was fierce, but all 3 teams had all members competing on the second day. The next morning, Sakamichi met Yuto. It was Yuto's first time seeing Sakamichi. Although people from Hakone Academy nicknamed him Mountain King, Yuto felt none of that imposing aura and declared a challenge. He wanted to beat Sakamichi in today's climbing stage. He joined the high school competition just to defeat Sakamichi. It was the first time Sakamichi heard of his nickname and felt very shy. So he also asked Yuto about his nickname. Since you asked sincerely, I will kindly tell you, top of the mountain hornet. The second day of the race is about to start. According to the high school competition rules, the order of departure on the second day is decided by the results of the first day. Sohoku and the main group of Hakone Academy started 3 minutes and 15 seconds after Takudo, the first-place finisher. The second day's course starts with a climbing section, followed by a long downhill, then a flat section, and finally crossing a waterfall. Today's route is the longest and most brutal of the 3 days. Since it starts with a mountain road, the main group will rely on Sakamichi to catch up with the leading group. Sohoku has the advantage as they had 2 people in yesterday's leading group, while Hakone Academy and Kyoto Fushimi High School had only 1 each. Whether it's blocking or taking turns leading to conserve energy, Sohoku has the upper hand. Tashima guesses that Hakone Academy will slow down near the mountain, and that's when Sakamichi needs to seize the opportunity to speed up and widen the gap. Despite their expectations, Hakone Academy did not slow down, but instead accelerated first. Sakamichi had no choice but to speed up to keep up. Unexpectedly, just as Teshima commanded Sakamichi to sprint all out, Hakone Academy suddenly decelerated. Teshima was indeed a master strategist. After Sohoku gained the leading advantage, Teshima began his analysis. It turned out that Kuroda, who had crashed the day before and was the last to cross the finish line, was the reason Hakone Academy had to wait for him to catch up before they could move together. Just when Sohoku thought their plan could proceed smoothly, Issa encountered issues. Due to extreme fatigue, he was out of form and often distracted today. Teshima and Sakamichi up front did not notice anything amiss, but Aoyagi saw clearly. Issa had fallen behind several times, causing Aoyagi to worry about his condition. By then, Hakone Academy had finally gathered all 5 riders. In waiting for Kuroda, they were now positioned with the trailing teams, but were finally ready to chase Sohoku. Meanwhile, Issa's condition worsened. Not wanting to hold his team back, he kept quiet, and eventually even stopped. By the time he realized, Hakone Academy had overtaken him. He could only choose to follow behind Hakone Academy, but he couldn't even keep up with his own team, let alone Hakone Academy. The opponents wouldn't slow down to wait for you. The Hakone Academy 5-man group accelerated and left Issa behind. The leading Sohoku trio was confused, wondering how they ended up 1 person short. Was this a horror movie? Issa reminded Teshima of Koga from his first year, who had put immense pressure on himself as the only freshman in the team, eventually leading to a crash. Perhaps Issa was the same. Rescue Captain Sakamichi wanted to go back to save Issa, but Teshima disagreed. Their current goal was to catch up with the leaders, Shunsuke and Naruko, and they couldn't afford to lose their advantage. This year was different. This year's Sakamichi was the ace climber, meant to directly compete with Manami and Yuto. Sending him now to rescue would put Sohoku in a very difficult position. Teshima was arguably the only character with a normal IQ in the series. However, with Sakamichi still thinking about how to save Issa, Aoyagi volunteered to go back for the rescue. Surprisingly, Teshima agreed this time. What a double standard. After exchanging a lot of sentimental words, Aoyagi reluctantly parted from Teshima. Teshima had no time for farewells as Hakone Academy was already closing in. The two had to move forward without looking back. However, meeting up with Issa was not easy for Aoyagi, as Issa had almost stopped. Unless he continued forward, he couldn't meet up with Aoyagi. If he gave up the race, Aoyagi's sacrifice would be in vain. Just when Issa was about to lose his composure, he suddenly heard Koga's voice behind him. Koga was extremely tired and thought it might be better to just go himself. Fortunately, his words greatly boosted Issa's morale. It turned out that Koga had been very concerned about Issa and had been worried since they started in the morning, so he began to walk, chasing after the cyclists. Incredibly, Koga caught up to Issa, who was on a bike, on foot. To keep Issa going, Koga started pushing him from behind. If an outside spectator assists for too long, it's considered cheating and results in a time penalty. Koga said he wouldn't push continuously. He would stop intermittently, exploiting a loophole. However, an awkward situation arose when pushing didn't work, because human legs can't outrun a bike. The main group had already caught up. A normal person would have hidden behind the group for protection from the wind, but Issa stopped by the roadside and watched them pass. Fortunately, Koga saw Aoyagi ahead and encouraged Issa not to give up, because his teammate was coming to rescue him. Seeing his cycling god Aoyagi approach reignited Isa's fighting spirit. With Koga's help, he finally caught up with Aoyagi. Unexpectedly, Isa asked Aoyagi if he had also fallen behind. Aoyagi didn't waste words and started in inflation mode, turning into his larger form. However, Isa's stamina was not great, and he would fall behind again if they went too fast. Surprisingly, Isa thought Aoyagi was struggling and took the lead. Aoyagi was baffled, wondering what the point of his return was. After a while, Aoyagi realized something was off as Isa began pedaling faster. Aoyagi, who came to rescue, ended up taking shelter behind him. Soon, they caught up with the earlier main group. The new riders were shocked, while those who had seen Sakamichi's performance last year were not surprised. Sohoku liked to fall behind and then catch up, humiliating other competitors. However, after catching up with the group, Isa relaxed too much and almost collapsed. Luckily, Aoyagi caught him. They planned to rest behind the group, but then they saw riders from Kyoto Fushimi High School break away. If they allowed them to join the lead group, Sohoku would be at a severe disadvantage. They had no choice but to keep moving forward, but Isa was exhausted after just a few pedal strokes. Aoyagi was prepared, however. He pulled out a secret weapon, a note with the lyrics to Princess Song, which he had sung many times, taught to him by senior Tadakoro. Initially, Aoyagi was skeptical, but after learning that Tadakoro had caught up with his teammates by singing this song, he believed in its magical power. Thus, the Church of the Princess Song was established. Aoyagi began to sing without hesitation, causing Isa to cringe with embarrassment. However, despite the ridicule from those around him, Aoyagi firmly continued singing the Princess Song. After finishing, Isa looked into Aoyagi's determined eyes and realized that he was not joking. To catch up with their teammates ahead, Isa knew he had to sing despite the embarrassment. The Princess Song truly had power. As they sang, they both felt a surge of strength and began to pull away from the main group. However, Isa was so embarrassed that he stopped singing at one point. But Aoyagi told him they must not stop and needed to sing wholeheartedly for it to work. Otherwise, they would quickly be caught. The two hardcore princesses surged forward. The scene shifts to the other side where Hakone Academy was about to catch up with Sakamichi and his team. Tashima wanted Sakamichi to speed up to meet with Shunsuke sooner. However, Hakone Academy wouldn't let them get away easily and sent Yuto to break from the main group. Yuto quickly caught up to Sakamichi. Tashima knew Yuto was there to hold them back, so he pushed Sakamichi forward and stayed behind to block Yuto. Unexpectedly, Yuto easily dodged Tashima with a quick maneuver and overtook him. Tashima immediately chased after him, and the two were side by side again. Yuto then used a death glare technique to force Tashima off the track, widening the gap once more. In an instant, Yuto caught up to Sakamichi. He repeated his tactic, first shaking Sakamichi's confidence with verbal attacks, then cornering him with his death glare before speeding away. However, he underestimated Sakamichi's ability to chase. No matter how fast he went, Sakamichi always kept up, even managing to overtake Yuto. Although Sakamichi was not singing aloud, he was silently singing the Princess Song in his heart. Despite the distance, Naruko could feel the intense pressure emanating from behind him and knew without looking that it was Sakamichi and Yuto battling. The situation had become utterly fantastical, almost like in Dragon Ball where characters could sense who was fighting just by their energy. After a deep conversation with Sakamichi, Yuto realized the difference between them. Sakamichi was focused on team victory, whereas Yuto didn't care about his team's success as long as he won. Knowing it was a battle of ideologies, Yuto was determined to defeat Sakamichi to prove his point. He finally ate the wafer he had been holding the entire episode, then stood up and pumped his bike, accelerating instantly and leaving Sakamichi behind. Sakamichi also started pumping his bike, but this time Yuto was faster and met up with Takuto first. However, Naruko and Shunsuke also slowed down to regroup with Sakamichi. Just as they thought Sohoku still had a numerical advantage, Sakamichi informed them that Aoyagi and Isa had fallen behind. Meanwhile, Hakone Academy's group of 4 also caught up. Shunsuke completely lost his composure, feeling like he had fallen from heaven to hell. In an instant, the matchup shifted from 3-on-2 to 3-on-6. Shunsuke knew defeating the full Hakone Academy team with just 3 riders was a fantasy. They had to slow down and wait for Teshima. It seemed that aside from the three protagonists, the rest of the Sohoku team was just holding them back. Naruko, unwilling to let Hakone Academy go easily, chased after them alone and unexpectedly encountered Akira, who appeared out of nowhere, not having been seen in the previous chase. Teshima finally caught up with Shunsuke and Sakamichi, but another problem arose. Teshima was too weak. He was exhausted just from catching up, and Shunsuke had to slow down to accommodate him. Shunsuke had always wanted to cooperate with his teammates since joining Sohoku, but this limited his own abilities. By then, Kyoto Fushimi High School's main force had also caught up. With Shunsuke and Sakamichi burdened, they were no match for Kyoto Fushimi High School. Shunsuke realized how foolish it was to have waited for Teshima, losing speed and morale instantly. Now, only Sakamichi could barely keep them going. Teshima tried to comfort Shunsuke, but the situation was caused by his own weakness, and Shunsuke couldn't hold back and furiously scolded him. Sohoku began to argue internally. Meanwhile, the 5 riders from Kyoto Fushimi High School had joined Akira. Alone, Naruko looked particularly vulnerable against the 6 riders and could only follow in their slipstream. Kyoto Fushimi High School pressed on towards Hakone Academy with only 3 kilometers left to the sprint prize on the second day. Toichiro vowed to redeem last year's humiliation and decided to race himself. He provocatively flexed his pecs at Akira. With no strong sprinters on Kyoto Fushimi High School's side, Akira had to take the lead himself. The showdown was about to begin. Kamari suddenly burst out, grabbing Toichiro's pecs in a move that was overly erotic, delighting the crowd. He directly challenged Akira to a race. Despite having no information on this bizarre Hakone Academy, Toichiro was fearless and ready to compete as a champion. Toichiro and Kamari both sprinted forward. Toichiro found that no matter how much he accelerated, he couldn't shake off Kamari due to his special ability to gauge acceleration from muscle changes in the legs. And from just one touch, Kamari knew Toichiro's left pec was named Frank. The two unexpectedly got along well as muscle enthusiasts. Toichiro initially thought Kamari was just a bluffing novice, but Kamari's riding became increasingly exhilarating, eventually overtaking Toichiro. Toichiro realized that despite his eccentricity, Kamari was surprisingly good at cycling. However, Toichiro was also hiding his true strength and slowly started to unzip his jersey, a sign he was about to go all out. In just a moment, he was riding alongside Kamari again. In fact, when Toichiro was chosen as the new team captain last year, most people disagreed, because captains are usually either the ace or the climber, who stay till the end to lead the team. Toichiro knew others' thoughts and intended to pass the captaincy to Kuroda. However, after meditating with his pectorals, he regained his confidence. He believed he could lead Hakone Academy to its peak again. Toichiro left Kamari far behind, but Kamari had a second form. He put on his goggles, which created a polarizing effect, causing him to hallucinate being in a field of flowers. The sight of muscles in this field excited him immensely, like being on drugs. The author seems happy with this. Regardless, Kamari, wearing goggles, caught up with Toichiro again. Originally, Kamari was normal, just naturally fond of muscles. His obsession led him to a cycling track in 8th grade to see Akira's muscles. I wonder why cyclists, typically enduring long distances, aren't leaner. Wouldn't a gym be a better place to admire muscles? Perhaps you could have been a bodybuilder by now. On the track, Kamari met his true love, Akira. To speak to Akira, he attended bike races daily. When Akira looked at him, he was too nervous to speak. I never expected a sports anime to turn into this. Akira saw through Kamari and encouraged him to be himself. Realizing he was understood, Kamari let himself go, shouting, "Senior Akira, I want to touch you." Seeing Kamari's ecstatic face, Akira knew he had met someone as peculiar as himself. Thus, he invited Kamari to cycle together, driven by the desire to touch Akira's muscles. Their goal was to join the high school league and touch more muscles. Toichiro then went full throttle, but was surprised to find he couldn't shake off Kamari. Moreover, Kamari could guess Toichiro's strategy by observing subtle muscle movements, seizing the chance to overtake him. With only 100 meters left, Toichiro knew the final curve was the best chance to overtake. However, a mineral water bottle suddenly appeared in front of him, reminiscent of the first season, not wanting a repeat of his previous defeat. When the rear wheel hit the bottle, it slipped, but Toichiro managed to control his bike and wasn't overtaken by Kamari. At the crucial moment, Toichiro's muscles exploded, turning him into a beam of light, unstoppable. He didn't falter at the last moment and successfully claimed the sprint prize. Naruko can only take shelter behind the Kyoto Fushimi High School team members to avoid the wind. His teammates are too slow to keep up. Meanwhile, Sakamichi and his team are now 5 minutes behind the lead group. They have even been caught up by Kumamoto High School, the perennial extras, just like last year. Tashima has invited them to cooperate and chase the lead group together with 9 riders. However, after being deceived by a pervert last year, they are now suffering from PTSD and trust no one. The 3 Sohoku riders were overtaken by Kumamoto High School. It should have been a moment of despair, but he smiled because he just heard that Issa and Aoyagi were catching up. This means Sohoku can finally gather 5 riders. As Sakamichi predicted, Aoyagi and Issa finally caught up. Tashima was tearful, having lost hope before, and he was overjoyed to ride with Aoyagi again. The two reunited successfully. Aoyagi reactivated and chased vigorously. Tashima decided not to let Sakamichi lead, aiming to compete for the mountain prize the next day, and needed to conserve energy. At this time, Hakone Academy had already entered the mountain stage. Yuto took the lead, and Manami, who was eagerly awaiting a showdown with Sakamichi, was told by Kuroda not to waste energy. However, he stated that if Sakamichi caught up, he would compete with all his might. Before he could meet Sakamichi, Kyoto Fushimi High School accelerated first. 2 underlings led Akira forward. Hakone Academy immediately responded, with Yuto and Manami blocking their path. However, Akira did not care about his underlings, as long as he could gain a leading advantage, even if it meant exhausting his energy and dropping out again. The 2 underlings accelerated fully. Just as they gained a slight lead, Manami activated his wing mode, and Kyoto Fushimi High School's path was blocked again. While the 2 teams were entangled, cheers suddenly came from behind. Everyone thought Sohoku had caught up, but it turned out to be Kumamoto High School, leading to some disappointment amidst the surprise. Seeing the chaos, Akira decided to take advantage of it. First, he let his teammates pretend to be exhausted, then moved to the right to make way for Kumamoto High School. As Hakone Academy's view was blocked, Akira and his underlings accelerated full force. Before anyone could react, the Kyoto Fushimi High School trio was already far ahead. Sohoku's main group had just entered the mountain road and saw Kumamoto High School's team, each with a distressed expression, seemingly heavily impacted. This increased their concern for the lead group, but also meant they had finally caught up. Upon closer inspection, Teshima noticed the numbers in the lead group were off. Hakone Academy was missing 2, and Kyoto Fushimi High School was missing 3, including Naruko. He realized this wasn't the true lead group. There were faster riders ahead. Hakone Academy had sent Yuto and Takuto, meaning Manami couldn't settle the score with Sakamichi just yet. To catch the lead group, Sakamichi had to start a fierce chase with Shunsuke. Everyone pushed hard here because the mountain prize and finish line were close the next day. If lucky, they could sweep both awards. Hence, each team's strategy involved a climber plus an ace. Kyoto Fushimi High School was still in the lead, but their first climber was spent. However, Akira planned to drain his last bit of energy before abandoning him. Naruko, like a parasite, stayed behind Akira to avoid the wind. Akira ignored him, thinking Naruko was no threat after soloing for so long. Unexpectedly, Naruko launched a sacrifice attack, blocking Kyoto Fushimi High School's path with his last energy, knowing Shunsuke could catch up. At this time, Shunsuke and Sakamichi were taking turns leading, chasing at full speed. However, Hakone Academy reached Kyoto Fushimi High School first, infuriating Akira. In response, Akira sped up and knocked Naruko aside, causing him to lose speed. But Naruko's efforts weren't in vain, as Shunsuke and Sakamichi caught up just as he fell behind, completing the relay. Akira was furious and urged Mizuta to speed up with only 1,500 meters to the mountain prize. At full force, Sakamichi quickly caught up with Hakone Academy, startling Yuto and even surpassing him, threatening to overtake Kyoto Fushimi High School. Hakone Academy decided to stay behind Sohoku to draft. Yuto realized Sakamichi was stronger now than during their previous one-on-one. He understood Sakamichi had been holding back before. Sakamichi increased his cadence and caught up with Kyoto Fushimi High School 500 meters before the mountain prize. His task completed, Shunsuke surged forward. Unexpectedly, Akira grabbed Mizuta and threw him out to compete for the mountain prize, disrupting the opponent's formation. A climber contesting for the mountain prize couldn't lead the ace, putting them at a disadvantage for the final sprint. However, it was Hakone Academy's ace, Takuto, who took the bait, thinking as an ace he had to sweep all awards. Despite winning the mountain prize, his excessive effort meant Hakone Academy was virtually out of the final sprint. Akira could barely contain his glee. Now his only competitor was Shunsuke. He even gave Shunsuke a boost by pushing him forward, passing on the spirit of Sohoku. Although Hakone Academy had a numerical advantage, Yuto was completely unsettled. He couldn't understand why Takuto wasted his precious energy on a trivial mountain prize. An ace without the energy to sprint is like a gun without bullets. Continuing like this would leave no chance to win the championship. However, Takuto told him he hadn't given up on reaching the finish line. He wanted both the mountain prize and the championship. This statement plunged Yuto into memories. When Yuto first joined the school, he was a troublemaker because his seniors often compared him unfavorably with Shinkai, which was a sore spot for him. Consequently, he was always rude to his seniors. His undeniable strength often humiliated the second-year seniors in races, giving him an air of invincibility. To teach the arrogant younger student a lesson, Takuto challenged Yuto, especially on an uphill segment where Yuto was most confident. Yuto initially tried to speed away, but Takuto, using his large frame, blocked his path. No matter how much Yuto accelerated, he could not surpass Takuto. Seizing the opportunity, Takuto lectured him, explaining that the seniors might seem weaker only because they were injured, and otherwise, Yuto would not stand a chance against them. Yuto, incredulous and disoriented, gradually lost speed and eventually lost the race. Since then, Yuto became a devoted fan of Takuto and gradually integrated into the Hakone Academy team. Although Takuto claimed he was still aiming for the championship, he slowed down with 1 kilometer to the finish line. Yuto now deeply regretted not taking the initiative to compete for the mountain prize himself. However, Takuto had secretly told Yuto that his actions were meant to make Akira lower his guard, thinking Hakone Academy was out of contention. But his real plan was for Yuto to sprint to the finish. Even though Yuto was a climber, he likely inherited his brother's top sprinting genes and could surely succeed. Genetics clearly explained by Yu, as he started to shield Yuto from the wind, trying to help him close the gap before running out of energy. With Takuto's support, Yuto finally caught up with Akira and Shunsuke at 600 meters from the finish, leading to a 3-way race again. Yuto had always lived in his brother's shadow and chose to be a climber to forge a different path, yet his sprinting abilities were strong. The three were neck and neck until a sharp turn just before the finish. Shunsuke and Yuto collided, slowing them down. Yuto then slowed down behind Akira, then swiftly overtook him on the other side using a maneuver called flanking overtaking. He used Akira's draft for a moment, then accelerated past him. Shunsuke and Akira immediately chased after him. Yuto's sprint was actually a feint to make the others speed up. The significance of this move was unclear, but it certainly worried Akira, who saw Yuto's tactics as dangerous. While the two mocked each other in a heated exchange, Shunsuke quietly gained a leading advantage. By the time they realized, they were already behind and had to chase hard. Shunsuke, who had been constrained by external considerations in the past, now wanted to ride based on his intuition. It seemed as if the dominant Shunsuke of old had returned. Meanwhile, Akira was also transforming, determined not to repeat last year's loss. He recalled his mother's lesson on catching fireflies. Being too forceful could result in failure, and it was essential to gently protect them to keep opportunities from slipping away. This nostalgic memory was just a way to boost his morale. As Akira caught up with Shunsuke, Yuto was not far behind, recalling times he rode with his brother. Yuto trained with his brother from a young age. However, others thought he was far inferior to his brother and wouldn't let him run together. Instead, Yuto had to take simpler routes. To catch up to his brother, he trained alone continuously and finally won his first championship. When he felt he could finally be recognized, people still credited his success to being Hayato's brother. Even when he won on his own, they believed his brother was the reason for his success. The memory ends. Yuto finally unleashed his Chikan lineage and entered Chikan mode, quickly catching up with the three racers. Now, only the last 50 meters of the race remained. Akira even grew hands all over his body. In the end, The three pushed their bikes and crossed the finish line almost simultaneously. Since the first season, finishing at the same time had become a tired trope. Akira won. But what did that prove? It was just better luck. Shunsuke's biggest mistake was that he didn't reminisce. Next, Sakamichi, distracted, lost the 5th place he had almost secured to Mizuta from Kyoto Fushimi High School at the last moment. After the race, Shunsuke apologized to everyone, knowing he had disappointed them. But Teshima knew he had tried his best. After all, in the world of competitive cycling, the champions of the previous days didn't matter. It only mattered to be the first to cross the line on the last day. During the award ceremony, Akira finally stood on the championship podium he had longed for, snatched the microphone from the host, and started mocking Shunsuke and Yuto, calling them disgusting flies. This was purely offensive. Surprisingly, the audience echoed his comments. In real life, he would have been criticized. Teshima remained confident about the next race because he and Aoyagi had a secret weapon: their synchronized running. Suddenly, Aoyagi knelt down before him, reminiscent of last year when Sohoku had an injured member. This plot seemed familiar. Last year, it was Shingo. This year, Aoyagi. It was just a repeat with different characters. Aoyagi was still set to race the next day, keeping his injury a secret to avoid demoralizing the team, only telling Danchiku, who came to help him in his room. Sakamichi changed to a new lightweight gear, so he decided to go out for a run during the race period. Coincidentally, during this outing, he ran into Todo, now a university racer who had improved significantly. After a brief exchange, Todo mentioned he was in a hurry to catch someone and couldn't stay to chat, speeding off. Sakamichi realized the person Todo was chasing must be extraordinary. Could it be Yusuke-senpai? He sped up to follow. Suddenly, a thin, swaying shadow appeared in front of him, creating a somewhat terrifying atmosphere. Sakamichi nearly panicked, holding his rapidly beating heart, but upon closer inspection, it turned out to be Yusuke shaking his bike. Todo challenged Yusuke to a race, and Sakamichi ended up being the referee. Yusuke and Todo hadn't seen each other for a year, and were both eager to compete. They gave their all and raced up the mountain. Sakamichi, following behind, was inspired by their passion and wanted to see more of their thrilling contest. However, they quickly reached the mountaintop with no clear winner. Dissatisfied, both Yusuke and Todo decided to climb again. Sakamichi was thrilled and immediately followed. They cycled up and down 6 times without stopping, with Yusuke eventually winning. They were satisfied, but Sakamichi, having just completed a race that day and now exhausted from following them, still had another race tomorrow. He was the only one truly suffering. After the race, Sakamichi finally had a chance to talk with Yusuke, who told him that despite the increased responsibilities in his second year, he must not lose his way and should stick to his own style. This motivated Sakamichi, who felt invigorated. Todo regretted letting Sakamichi follow them, realizing it made a strong rival for Hakone Academy. However, he considered that having a strong opponent like Sakamichi could also be beneficial for Manami. On the 3rd morning, the final day of the high school league, Hakone Academy decided not to compete for the sprint and mountain prizes to avoid a repeat of the previous day's events. They were focused solely on winning the championship. During an interview, Takuto realized Manami was late again. This recurring theme proved fatal. Meanwhile, Sohoku also repeated their pre-race rituals, rallying together. The manager noticed Aoyagi's leg injury, and with no painkillers left, Aoyagi had to endure the pain, focused only on winning. The race attracted many spectators, including fans of Sakamichi, who was so overwhelmed by meeting a female fan for the first time that he was speechless and even fell. Shunsuke couldn't help but ask why he always falls once a year. With less than 5 minutes to the race start, the Kyoto Fushimi High School team arrived late, all having shaved their heads purportedly to reduce weight, but actually to be the comic relief. The top 3 from the previous day had already started, and Manami was still not at the starting line. Mizuta and Sakamichi set off, encountering Manami, who had just arrived. They briefly stopped time to speak, agreeing to meet on the track. Manami caught up just before the main group from Hakone Academy left. Sohoku's team followed closely. As the 3rd day's race was on a flat track, Sakamichi had no advantage, so Takuto was the first to reach the leading group. Sakamichi, eager to catch up with Shunsuke, sped up, leaving Mizuta behind and rushing towards the front. Go, Shunsuke! Head towards the finish line! That's all for today's episode. See you in the next one.